Welcome to A Brush with Color, Week 4 watercolor painting. My name is Charlene, and I'll be taking you through this exercise. This week, it's all about landscapes, starting with a mountain landscape that includes sky and water for painting one. We'll be working on values, shadows, and image reflections. Just a reminder to start and stop this video as you need, or slow down, speed up as works best for you. Let's see what tools we need. We've got our reference photo, our brushes, our image that we've already traced onto our 140-pound watercolor paper pad. We've got our palette that contains all of the pigments or the paint, as they're also called. We have our water container, our spritzer bottle, and our micro cloth towel, which is fabulous for soaking up the water and the paints, and you just throw it in the wash when you're done. So it replaces the paper towel almost completely. We're going to begin with rolling over our image that we've traced with our kneaded eraser, and that's going to help to reduce the heaviness of the lines. And you just roll it over until you feel that the lines are not quite as dark as when they started, and that you'll still be able to see the image that you've traced, but it won't be showing through when you're painting. You got to be careful not to erase too much. You can also rub it this way if you want, but rolling it across works better. Okay. So I'm going to put my kneaded eraser aside. We just don't need that kneaded eraser right now. Okay, before we begin on the actual painting, let's look at how we're going to paint these little trees so that when we get right into it, it'll be easy for us to move forward. Open your pad to a fresh page in our book and activate a color. So we'll activate our green with our spritzer bottle because it's been sitting for a couple days. When the paints sit for a couple days, they get hard and dry out, and all we need to do is spray them with a spritzer bottle. Going to take the smaller of our two brushes, wet that brush, grab some of that pigment from the edge, make a little puddle. And in this case, we want, from a value perspective, we're going to want to paint this pretty dark. So, and that will help when we are actually practicing this technique. Got some undersea green, and I'm going to dab it on my towel to take some of that water off. And all we're going to do is pretty much make squiggly lines. So we'll start here. We'll start with a little tip, and then we're going to go like this back and forth. And you don't need to complete it. Just see how we can have some white in these areas without filling it completely with the pigment. Isn't that cool? That's it. That is a tree. Let's do another one. Get some more pigment. And we want to always be varying our heights of our trees. So we'll just do that here, even though it's a practice, and we're going to go back and forth with the point, the tip of our brush, and just back and forth. I've got quite a bit of water on there, but that's okay because it will dry. There you go, and you notice how we go from thinner up here to broader at the bottom. All right, that's it. That's how you paint a tree. Of course, there's about 100 other ways to paint a tree, but this is the way we're going to paint our trees in this image. Okay, so let's go to our traced image of our landscape. I'm going to take our larger brush, clean this brush first, clean the smaller brush so that it doesn't get too dry with all that pigment. And we'll start with the sky. We're going to use our reference photo quite a bit in this painting so that we can replicate what's going on because we're learning. I'm going to do a wet on wet technique, and I'm going to wet the sky. Because you can see the sky is not completely covered. We've got light, dark, we've got a lot of white spaces in there. So I'm just going to cover this around the mountains and across, just the sky. I'm not doing the mountains. I'm doing above the mountains and around. And this is just with water, clean, fresh water using my larger brush. Then I'm going to activate my ultramarine blue. You might want to keep your paper towels nearby anyway as well with the microcloth, because you're going to want to use them to pick up any puddles that are going out of control. Okay, so we have our blue, and we've got a little bit of this neutral that's blending in, and that's a good thing. We like that. We are going to keep this skyline, or the sky itself, a little brighter than these. We'll add a little bit more neutral into these colors to darken that up. I'm just going to use, again, the ultramarine blue with just a touch of neutral with a wet brush, and just dab that in, dab it around, and leave some white spots around. Go back in there, get some more. And your clouds aren't going to look exactly like this, but you're going to end up with your own sky look. But you can see how we just dab the water in there and leave some of that white so that it will actually form a cloud on its own. You can see there's some sky around this mountain, the highest peak. So we've put that in this area here. And then some down in there. Once you put it down, you can move the paint around a bit, but you want to make sure that you still have that white and that movement of the clouds, So here, there's a little bit more white in here, so I'm just going to lift some of that off in that area. Lift that off. Yeah, lift some of this off in here. And then I'm going to just go back and get a wee bit more pigment, darker pigment, and I'm just going to go back in this side and put some more in, because remember, this is going to dry much lighter than you can see it on the page. So what we have already put down is going to be really light. And we want some texture and some depth and values. We want those values to be changed up as we go along. You can see the deepness of the color. Just going to put a little bit more in here. And again, I've got my book is buckling, so I'm quite aware of that. So I'll move this over here, and if I want to grab some of that water, excess water, just dry off your brush and pick it up with the tip of your brush. Okay, let's see what we got. That looks great. I bet you yours looks fabulous. Fabulous, darling. All right. And your sky you might have more sky or less sky depending on where you actually traced your mountains. I had to do this one twice because the first time I traced it way up here and I realized I don't have any sky. So I did it again. Okay, we're looking at values. And we have a dark value will make an object look closer up. A lighter value will make it look farther or further away. So you can see we have 3 values here. We have the closest mountain, the one that's medium range, and then the one that's furthest away. So let's just leave this for a bit. One of the other things you'll notice that even within the mountain, there are different values. So this mountain appears the closest, but you'll see that the darker values are around the edges of this, at the top, at the peaks. And then as it comes down, it lightens up. And so we'll have a really light value, but then imposed on that is a darker value to show that there is a cliff or a projection on that mountain. And the same here. So we've got a darker, and then we've got this gray in here, and then we've got the lightest. So when we're looking at from a design concept, not only are we looking at what is the darkest and the lightest values for range and depth, we're also looking at what is it that we want our eye to focus on. So do we want our eye to focus on the mountain? And which mountain do we want it to focus on? Because we're literally just painting shapes, and we're painting shapes for the eye to focus on. Okay. In following our rule of painting light to dark, we're going to start with the lightest mountain and the medium, and then go to the darkest. Now that our sky has dried somewhat, and we didn't really put a lot around the lightest, we're going to move to our palette and mix some ultramarine blue with a neutral. And remember, the neutral just makes the ultramarine darker, so we end up with a darker blue. And we want to use our other page or a paper strip to test the color. Well, I'm happy with that. I like that a lot. And that's just using the 2 colors. That's the ultramarine blue and mixing it with neutral. So that will give us a nice differentiation from the sky. And in order to make this a lighter value than this mountain, we want more water, less pigment. So I'm going to go move this over so you can see. In the water, tap the towel, and then it'll make it lighter. See that? So let's go along here. We're just going to go right along the tips of that mountaintop. And you have lines and dotted lines that show you where to put that paint. You might have seen that my mountain went right into the sky. That's okay, because it wasn't quite dry yet. And we just want it to, we're going to get it to fade in, right? We're just going to get it to fade in. I just want this to go just a wee bit in here. And we like to wiggle, 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 wiggle to really create that gradient that goes down to the mountain. Yeah, that looks really good. All right. Then we're going to do the medium, and we can just again go over just to the closest edges of our mountain. You see I have a lot of water, so I'm going to tap, dry off my brush, and pick up some of that water and paint. And I'm just going to use that to go on this side. Yeah. And you can see this one comes down a little further. So we've got this piece here. And I'm going to dry off my brush completely, clean it and dry it so that I can work with this water that I've put here. And I'm just going to wiggle, 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 wiggle it down into the side of that mountain. And in some places I want some white or light left, and some places I want it to be darker. So I can create all of this white, all of this blue. Just make it really light across. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I'm coming back and pulling that paint down with my brush. Yeah, see, it's just, yeah, this one's going to come down here anyway, so we can just create that. And again, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Do very, very, very light, light, light across here with our brush. Okay. Now I'm just going to do a little lightness here. Just a little bit of that blue. Now we can do wet on wet. We could wet this whole mountain. So let's just go in that mountain and wet it. So far we've done the wet on dry technique. And you've got your lines, your guides that will show you. Right, and we want it here too as well. So I'm just putting some water down. I'm making that the most prominent area where we're going to put our paint, because as we may recall, the paints will go where the water is and won't go where it's dry. So I'm going to pick up some of that pigment. I'm going to make it a bit darker and a bit creamier this time. And I'm going to just dab my brush and see how I did it, made the pigment darker than these other values. So this is a stronger value. I'm just dabbing that paint in to the wet. And the paint is following the water. I'm not pushing on it. I'm not, just doing little strokes and little strokes around the edges as well. I had some water run down here, which is kind of nice. Okay. Oh, that looks so pretty, especially with the texture of the paper. That's what I really love, seeing how the texture of the paper grabs that pigment. Okay, I'm going to dry this off because I've got a puddle forming right here that I do not want. Again, I'm going to dry that off. I want a ridge here is what we're trying to paint, a ridge, but it got a little too much water. And you can see that we've got some a little lighter in here. So I'm just going to do some of this in the middle. Not too much. That's going to soak in anyway. And I want lighter, a much lighter value coming down here. So see, I can just touch on this corner or this edge, and that value will come into the painting. Just runs right down into it. Isn't that beautiful? Woo! Let me tell you, this is so much easier to paint after I've done it like 4 or 5 times. So I understand if you're a bit stressed. Just pull some really light value. Don't worry if you go over the edges of the, or the tips of the trees. Oh, yes. And we have, so for values again, we have the lightest value, which means this is the mountain that's furthest away. This is the closest, and this is the medium range. And you might feel this one isn't dark enough still. We could add a little bit more pigment on the tips just to bring that out a bit more. Yeah. And if you get any hard lines, just do some wiggle. Yes. But we do want to have a little bit of a lightness in here. So I'm drawing off my brush and just pulling that up. Although I just might do a wee bit in here. Don't want it to be as dark as that middle one. Then your eye really doesn't know what to look at either when you're looking at composing your painting. Okay, and I'm gonna just do some wiggle in there. Yes, that is so nice. Don't you think? This guy here definitely comes down. So let's change our big brush right now to our smaller brush. That will help us do a little more detail, and particularly when we're working on our trees. When you do detail, you don't want too much water. Just gonna grab some of that and just run down here. This is to see the difference between the two mountains. There we go. Sun kind of comes down in here too. Yeah. Some of that dark pigment. I'm going to do that all the way along the tops here. Then I'm going to wiggle it out. Just dry that off with a little bit of water. Let's just follow our reference photo. Just add a little bit more. I've got a damp brush, so I'm pulling some of these darker values just to make them look a little more natural. Typically, when you're looking at a mountain, you have a dark side and a lighter side. This image seems to have two dark sides. And you'll see, because we did the wet on wet technique, see how this ran in here, this pigment ran in here? It's just given it that mystery kind of look. And I'm gonna get a little more pigment and make it just a little darker in here, just on this side here. Yeah, just a little darker. It's kind of gray. Did it a bit grayish here because I don't want to overcome this mountain. I want to ski that mountain, don't you? I'm taking a moment here to pause, to look at my image and plan how I'm going to approach the next steps of this painting. This is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start at the top left, and I'm going to work on some of that gray-green and work my way down. I'm going to move some of this blue off so that I can get my green going. I'm working with my smaller brush because we've got a lot of detail. My green has dried a little bit, so I'm going to activate it again with water spritzer. And I want it to be gray green, so that would mean to add a little bit of neutral and put it in with my light value green gray. Okay, I know it doesn't look like much there, does it? Okay, let's see what our reference photo looks like here. We're going to just do, this is pretty dry. Oh yes, good, feels good. Remember, back of your hand or back of your finger, just see if it's dry. We're just gonna run some, that light green gray. We're giving it an illusion of trees, an illusion of rocks. It doesn't have to actually be trees or be rocks. Just suggests that we have some rocks here, right? Yeah, just going all the way down along here. You've got your lines. You can follow your lines if you want. And again, remember, this is going to dry much lighter when it's done. And we have here, do you see this here? It's like a shadow. It's just a shadow coming in along the side. So I'm going to use that greeny gray green, just a really light scraping of it using the side, the belly side of my brush. Some more of that gray green. We're going to paint over some of this anyway, so we're not too worried. Yeah, right down here too. Got some of that going on here. Because these are just suggestions of rocks and suggestions of trees. And there's a little bit more bluish in here. So I can grab some of this blue too, this blue-gray. This is still pretty damp. I can do some of this coming down here. Just mix in a little bit of blue in there. Yeah, that's good. I'll let that dry a bit. And you can see this is going to be, we've got some lighter, brighter greens in here, which are really pretty. And then we have the dark, dark, dark. So we've got we have several values in here, several dark, light, bright values, but we're pretty much using the same colors. Let's use the green. I'm going to use the Undersea green, Daniel Smith, one of my favorite colors. I say that every time, I'm sure. So we could bring a little bit of yellow, activate that yellow with our spray bottle, do a little bit of a brighter green, bring in some of that yellow over here. I'm going to do a little bit of a puddle on this side here with the yellow. Oops, I didn't clean off my brush there. I don't want it too yellow. We want it more of a brighter green. I'm going to grab some of that in here. Let's see what I can do with these greens. It's a little yellowy, still a little too yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a little blue. Just a little blue in this one. It'll make it, so that's Undersea green with Hansa yellow and ultramarine blue, just to brighten that green up. Yeah, that's better. It's a clearer, it's less yellow. Yes, I like that. And we're just going to do a few of these lighter color trees in here. You don't want too much water in here because you want to be careful to be able to actually create that look of that tree that we practiced. Got the point, and then you've got your squiggling back and forth. They do not have to be perfect trees, not even a little bit perfect trees. I'm going to keep these ones back here. A little bit of a dab, and then back and forth. Okay. I'm going to go for deeper green. Let's call it a deeper green. And we're going to work on some of the colors down here. And they certainly don't have to be exactly the way you're looking at them there. Okay, so we've got some up here. Trees have all kinds of shapes and all kinds of sizes. So you really want to use the point of your brush. And this takes a little bit of practice, these trees, but one thing is we're going down a hill, and so they're certainly not the same height, and they all start moving down a bit. Got that little squiggle there, so I'm just squiggling. Some in the middle here. Smaller ones, bigger ones. There's some that are just a blip. Blip is a very technical term. I'm just saying. Yeah, just keep getting those trees in there. Use the tip of your brush. Do squiggles. Really helps to do that. Just that little itty bitty tip at the top, just a line. You could take it all the way down to the length of your tree even that you want it to be. Because that gives it that starting point of what that is going to look like. Is that tip. And that tip, if you bring it right down as a trunk, you're going to have an idea of where your tree is going to start and stop, and look at it and go, maybe I need a little bit more. Let's do here now. We're going to just do just some lines. Some lines again. Illusion, illusion. And we're going to make it so that it blobs down like this. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We've got some more coming down this way. Just some dark green. Some suggestion of some trees. Got these light ones, so we can now put in some dark ones. We've got this dark one up here, but I want this to be a little bit darker, so I'm gonna move down here a bit. Bring these in here because these are still pretty light. Get rid of some of the water. Do the squiggles back and forth with my tip of my brush, going right over top of the other tree. You can paint over top of the tree. See how by painting this darker over top of this lighter, we know that this tree is closer than that tree. Or maybe it's just a darker tree. All right, I'm gonna do some in here. There we go. Just doing that tree, the way that tree went, but I'm varying the height, the widths. We can have a really thick tree as opposed to all skinny trees. I'm gonna go in here. You can have some long branches come out too. They don't have to all be skinny branches. Yeah, a little bit brighter over here. And I'm going to do a little bit of that gray again. I'm going to go back to green gray. I missed some of that. Okay. I want it to be light, right? So do some in here. Coming down on the mountain. The mountain's coming this way. Again. It's going to soak in. Make some of this a little bit darker. Yeah, and then we've got a bit of a hill in here that's disappeared. So I'm going to put some more in there. And then grab a wee bit of the brown. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the green, that gray green. I want to put a bit more neutral in here. Yeah, there we go. Because we've got these rocks in here. I'm going to do them a bit, just a little bit of the brown, which is a mixture of quinacridone, burnt orange, and neutral, and I added a little bit of that gray-green in there. So we've got these colors in here that are going to add. Because typically on a lake shore, you've got some rocks. Put some in here too. But then in this one, we've got this. These trees come down quite a bit to the edge of the lake, but not completely. Okay, here's this rock here, and then we're gonna paint some trees that go up above. And what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna take my green, my undersea green, and I'm gonna add quite a bit of neutral to it. Here's the neutral. Here we go. Because we want it, it's really dark. Those trees are dark. So let's make that a dark, dark undersea green. And we're gonna love it. Okay, let's test that. Yep, that's darker than the other ones, even darker than that one. Just a touch more neutral, okay? And this is where we can do some of our really dark, this tree that's out on the edge. I think it's the tallest. It's pretty skinny. suck up some of that water. Ugh. And if it suddenly is a little too fat, well, then make it a fat tree. Or if it goes over the edge of where the edge is supposed to be, well, that's where it goes. We've got a jut out here of this branch. I'm going to take some actual neutral on its own and just put it inside there, because that's going to make it really nice and dark. Yeah. I'll do some darker in here as well. This looks like it's kind of taken on most of the neutral in here. And I can even do one in between these guys. You can see some of these trees look to me to be, in fact, black. Especially these around here have a... And we use neutral for black. We use neutral to mix with our other colors, but we also use the neutral as a color on its own, as black. It's good to put another color in with it. You can put the green, or you could put the ultramarine, either of those. So you can see we've got different values of trees going on here. We've got the darkest, we've got medium value, and we've got really light value. I'm going to do another little bit of black in this one. And we have, or neutral, sorry. We have this here, one in there. And these guys up here, I'm going to add this one here. This is a good one, right here, along here. That's not me crying, that's my dog, by the way, Shuggy. It's my little Shuggy, my Shugster. Here we go. It's looking pretty good. I want this to come out. I want this to come out just a bit more here to jut out. Okay, that's good. You can see how your sky has dried, and it's created all these clouds and shapes. Isn't that cool? All right, now just going to soften some of these lines, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a clean damp brush, and I'm just going to squiggle, 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 or wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Yeah. Now we have the reflection of the trees onto the water. I'm going to start by cleaning off my palette with a paper towel, not with the microcloth. I guess you could use your microcloth, but then you wouldn't be able to use it again for the rest of the painting period. I'm going to use my bigger brush to start with, and I'm going to use a greeny, kind of a greeny blue, but I'm going to do a wash across first. Then I'm going to come back and do some darker reflections. Water, let's do some water across here. Just going to wet the whole thing. Yeah. And you can go right to the bottom or not. It's up to you on your page. And just a really light green with a touch of blue. Yeah, oh, that's pretty. Greeny blue. And that's what we're going to put across the whole water area. Just to give it a light tinge of color. I want that to be damp. I want it to dry a bit before we get started, otherwise we'll lose total control. Now again, I'm looking at my image and I'm planning my next steps. And I'm going to make a green, this greeny, a darker greeny blue. Water, lots of water. And a darker value, because what we put down already, it's soaked in, it's hard to see. So we're going to do this portion in here. We're going to go over this, mostly this area here, with this darker blue, green. It's a little bit more green in there, darker green, blue. And if you still have your lines, you can see where we're going to just pull those in and go across in here. Yeah. And just, because it's damp, it is actually blending in with the water, so it's not going to give us hard lines or so we're following what we're doing here. I'm having a hard time seeing, sorry, because of the glare. So what we're doing is we're following this line across here. So you can see here's this mountain here. We're just using it because this is quite a distance away. We're just using a lighter color to represent that reflection. Because as we get up here in this area, it's going to be much darker. But we're using that rule of light, painting light to dark. And then I'm going to go to a darker blue, bring more of this blue in. Not complete, but a darker blue with, again, some neutral. I'm going to do the background in here. And this one, we dab all the way along, bring it in here. We don't want to actually represent the trees exactly yet. We're just doing that background in this area. Where do your trees pop out, I would say? So where are they going to pop out? So you want to have some of that image look where those are going to have the tips of the trees pop out in the, and then we're going down, 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 closer, closer, and I'm going to go right across in here. Yeah. And if you feel like you need more detail, which I do, I'm changing brushes, and I'm going to just clean some of these edges off where I've got the ends of the trees that are going to show through the water, right? And look at that darkness. It's just, giving us that another layer. We're really focused here on our layers. I'm going to soften up this edge a bit here. Yes. Okay, and I'm going to let this dry a bit because, again, if it's too wet, we won't be able to show our trees very well as a reflection. It'll just be a blob, which sometimes is okay in the reflection like you're seeing here. But in this case, we want a darker, clearer reflection showing underneath here. While this is drying off a bit, I'm going to work on this shore where the water hits the shore a bit and just has a bit of a cloud going into that. I'm going to use just a touch of red. Just a touch of red, maybe a touch of purple. Mix those two together and just go across here. Do a line across here. And then I'm going to dry my brush off. And then I'm just going to pull that light pink up just a wee bit into the mountain area. I did the wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. See that? It just gives it a little bit of a differentiation from the water into the mountain. I haven't seen too many mountains that are completely, oh no, I have. There are completely white mountains that give you snow blindness, but typically there's a lot of reflections in mountains, a lot of reflections. Just letting this dry a bit. I'm not happy with this tree, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to give it some, while I'm waiting for this to dampen up, I'm going to give it some dark green. Just go over top of it with a darker green. Take some of the water out. Yeah, that's better. Just looked like a big black blob. This one I want to make it a bit darker. So again, I'm going to do some really dark value, high pigment on this one in the green. Just go over top of that. Yeah, that's good. Same with this guy here. Okay. So we have these, and you can see this is blended in and creeped into and seeped into the water. So we have lots of veins that have come out, putting a bit of green in there just around the blue. Just adds, again, variation and texture. Yeah, because again, you've got all these reflections that are coming from the mountain into the water, and that is definitely multicolored. And here we're going to go with a darker neutral and green. Picking up my green might have been a better way to start that. And we can, because we can, just go right into this puddle with the blue, because certainly shadows have blue as well. I've tended to make my shadows in the green depth in this painting, but often the deep blue makes a really wonderful shadow. Okay, and we're gonna just come down in this, and you can see how the shadow is right in that water along the shoreline. And in many places there's a bit of a space. So when it's green to green or dark to dark, there's a little bit of a white space along there so that it doesn't become all just one long mass. You have that separation. And here I'm going to take this guy here, because we got a darker one right in here. And this one, because it's up high, it's going to be up be farther down in here. It's going to be less of the actual tree, the way the tree looks, and more of a blurb. More of a blur. Let's call it a blur rather than a blurb. It's going to be more of a blur of that. And same here. See, I'm just taking the darkest of those trees and just putting them down there. And in here. Got this guy going here and this one here. Just using that dark, dark green with a little tiny bit of ultramarine and you might see that these trees here don't seem to be dark enough to be those reflections. So I'm going to put a little darker in those trees over here. Yeah, that's okay. And again, I'm not going right up against that tree. I'm just taking it a little bit down from that. You need to have the actual tree in your painting to do the reflection. Oop. I'm going to just do squigglies back and forth, but it's going to be more of a blubber of the squigglies, not the actual same one, because again, we're in water, right? In water, there's movement in water. Yeah, this guy here, I'm gonna get some more darker pigment. This guy needs darker pigment. Okay, this guy needs something in here for sure. Yeah, that's looking really nice. I'm gonna just do a little bit of this in here. Okay, you can see we've got a line across here. Let that dry a bit. You can see we've got my pencil lines are in here, so we're going to try and erase those after they dry. Let's see. That's pretty dry. Here's a tiny eraser that I have that we can see. I'm going to just put it on the side and see if I can. Oh, bingo. It is erasing right through the paint. Some paints you can erase right through. So my lines of my pencil can or miraculously disappear. Perfect. Well, I'm doing that while this is wet, so I want to be really careful about that. I'm going to come back and I'm just going to just pull some of this paint across. So it's just showing a unity of the shadows. Just a little bit coming from, yeah, this here too has to show some reflection. Oh, that looks great. I'm happy with that. We want a blue in the bottom corner, just to pull that together. See, that's nice blue. This is more of a blue-green. But you can do it whatever color you want and however you want it to be. I'm going to use my larger brush with some water. Just go over top of it and just scratch along here. Give a little movement of the water. Ooh, get some new fresh water. Just want to go a bit darker in around here, but not to disturb the actual tree. So lighten that up. It's in my puddle. Water, dab. Look at my, ooh, that's pretty good. I like that a lot, actually. I've got this definition here of these treetops. Because these are coming up, right? Just want to go up a little bit more. Yeah. We're going to go like this in here. Just putting this a little bit darker greeny blue in here. Yeah, it's a bit bright. That blue seems a bit bright for me. So you can see, you can just go over top. If you paint a color you're not happy with, well, let's go over top and see once it starts to dry, see how you can adjust that color for yourself. That feels better for me. Yeah, absolutely. No, I wasn't happy with that before. But this that gray green, it's just so pretty. It's got some blue in it this time. See how I'm just adding to the allure, the mystique of that water reflection. There we go. Now I'm happier. Yeah. Oh, that feels so much better. Woo! Maybe just a wee bit darker in here. Wee bit, just a wee bit. And we have to be careful. We don't overwork our paintings because it's so easy to do, and I'm on that line. Okay, done. How do you feel after painting your first landscape? It's the last thing we do. We sign it, we date it, and hang it on the wall. Give yourself a huge round of applause. Woo! Next video is homework. Another landscape, this time with brilliant skies and trees.